إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلوات الله والسلام عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن اتبع سنته إلى يوم الدين. First and foremost, I'd like to apologize on being tardy. There was incredible traffic on 93 and it more than doubled my time. In business, it's normal to have partners and to have shareholders that go into the business with you. And the entire point of a business is that you yield some sort of product, you yield some sort of benefit, a profit to your partners and your shareholders. This is normal business tradition. And the higher the profit yield is, or the more money you're making, the more that you have to exert into making sure that systems are in place, that things are running smoothly, the more frequent and the more detailed your reviews have to be, and the more time you have to put into making sure that your business is running healthily, in a healthy manner. And brothers and sisters, our intellect, our aql, is in a business to get to the next life. And its partners, the partners that are working with our aql, is our soul. They're working in hand to try to get us to the next life. And whether this business, this partnership is successful or it fails is dependent on how the shareholders work together in this business. How the things that are involved in this business actually carry out the business itself. And our shareholders are our limbs. So our intellect is what controls how this business is going to go. It controls the way in which we're trying to achieve a goal. And our partner in this is our soul that is trying to get there and is directly affected by the actions or the decisions that are taking place by our intellect. And what carries out these things, what organizes and what takes care of the different functions of how these things go are our limbs. From our eyes to our tongues, to our stomachs and our private parts, and to our hands and to our feet. All 6 or 7 of these different things play an integral part in how we're doing in achieving our goal of having a successful and productive life that yields the rewards in the next life of achieving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure. And like all businesses, it requires a constant revision on our part to ensure that we're going in a healthy way. It requires us to analyze ourselves, as we mentioned last week, to look and deal with ourselves in the reality of what we're truly doing to ensure that we're going and we're moving in a healthy way. And if we don't, perhaps we won't meet our demise in this life, but in the next, we'll see the fruit of our labor. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ أو قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا, that truly the successful ones are those who purify themselves. Those who are prosperous, as another translation goes, are those who do tazkiyat an-nafs, those who refine their souls. And this is the job of all of these different parts and all of these different integral parts of our business and how we're trying to go into the next life. And we have to make sure that everything is working in tandem to achieve the most success. We have to make sure that our shareholders understand what's going on and that they're getting proper directions from the business owners and the partners. So our limbs are getting proper instruction into how to carry out things that are going on. And can we ask everyone to move up? So we have to make sure that our limbs are getting proper instruction, that they know what to do in the proper way. And we have to make sure that all the partners, our soul, is working hand in hand with our intellect to yield the best results. So our question is, what are we going to do to make sure that our intellect, our thought process, is trained to yield the most results? Because like every business, the first 2 or 3 years is very difficult. In the beginning, you're going to have the most challenges and the most difficulties in achieving what you're trying to achieve. But after, hopefully, you put some systems in place, things become more streamlined. Things become easier in producing the things that you want to do. You understand the best ways to conduct business. You understand where you can find the cheapest product so that you can produce the most reward. That's our goal with our intellects, with our souls, and with our limbs. What is going to be in the beginning the most difficult things to achieve what we're trying to do in purifying our souls? And then what along the way are we going to be able to find so that we can have successful business, so that we can purify our souls and achieve the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this business is not an easy business. We have many different competitors and enemies who are trying to take us out. First and foremost, our carnal and internal selves. We're naturally inclined to transgression and evil things. Our soul, as Sheikh Mukhtar, when he came, he mentioned that we have two selves. We have our intellect or our soul that's inclined to good, and we have our carnal and lower selves that are inclined to bad things. So now we have first and foremost a traitor on the inside. We have someone who's working against us, our own inclinations that are trying to deter us and tear us down from the inside. And we also have external enemies, the shaitan, who is trying to convince us that we are okay. Everything is fine. Let off the gas a little bit. You're doing better than other people. We also have other things in the dunya that make it a little bit more difficult. Whether it's our own fear in society that's very, very real. Whether it's our family that's telling us you need to be a little less religious. Whether it's our non-Muslim friends and family who don't understand what we're actually doing. We have enemies both on the inside and the out. But this is how we're going to be able to yield the highest reward. This is the nature of doing business. You naturally have difficulties when doing things. You naturally have things that perhaps are working against you. Competition and enemies. And we are our biggest enemy. Our capabilities are only due to what we are going to do. We're only limited by ourselves. As one of my teachers, he mentioned, we are all beloved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are all awliya of Allah, but the different levels are based upon our deeds and the nature of our own souls. How much and how hard are we going to fight to get to the next life with the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What are we going to sacrifice? What difficulties are we going to have to put aside so that we can have the biggest reward? What assets are we building to have our house in the next life? How are we training ourselves and our families to understand that this is a bigger thing than just right now? We're thinking long term in this mission. And so with the coming of a new year, many of us are trying to make New Year's resolutions. We're trying to make plans to become better people for the next year. But we really have to ask ourselves, how was last year? How am I today? And what am I going to change so that next year I can have the highest reward? Because if we don't change the nature of things how they are now, what will entice Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us to have a better year next year? وأقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين واستغفروه واتوبوا إليه. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wahda, wa salatu wa salamu ala man la nabiyya ba'da. Can we ask everyone to move up some more? There's still brothers coming in, mashallah, and we need to make as most space as possible. So, if we're in this business, we're in the business of trying to earn the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the business that we're in. And we're partnering with our souls to try to achieve purity so that we can be successful. Then now we have to make sure, as I mentioned before, that our shareholders, our limbs, are working in accordance with our soul and our intellect. And as Imam al-Ghazali, he mentions, separating all of these different things, our soul is very different than our mind. And our mind is very different than our soul and our limbs. But we have to train ourselves, as Imam al-Ghazali, he started with our minds, with our intellect. By training ourselves in how we're thinking, then we can train ourselves in how we're feeling spiritually. But sometimes we have to, we sort of have to force ourselves, or as it colloquially is said, we have to fake it till we make it. We have to try to act righteous so that we can internally feel and think righteous or be righteous. It requires us to make an effort to do things that we're not comfortable with so that we can get in the habit of thinking in a righteous manner. How are we looking at the world? How are we looking at our current situation? There are many things that each and every one of us in this room can be upset about, myself included. But how do we train ourselves to not just be angry with our current situation, but to see the bigger picture in things? To be able to look at a negative situation and see my own deficiencies in that. Am I entitled in how I'm looking? Do I feel that I deserve something from my situation? Or am I arrogant to think that I deserve more because of who I am and what I do? I'm speaking from first person now. But these are all things that we have to ask ourselves. And after we realize how we're feeling about these situations, how can we now flip it to see that this is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a blessing for me to now grow closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, humble myself more and serve better. What are we going to do with our situations? Because it's very, very easy to be negative and pessimistic about things. This is what shaitan wants us to do, because then it trains us to not do good. It trains us to complain. It trains us to be okay with how things are. We're not going to work to do more if we're happy with how things are right now. But we have to train ourselves to see the goodness in this, to see the blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to see what we're learning from this situation, so that I can further be more humble, so that I can work harder to earn Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's reward. This is what we have to, this is the work, brothers and sisters. And this is what we have to do with the upcoming year. So when we're trying to make our New Year's resolutions, when we're trying to change and work better at things, we have to first check ourselves. How am I thinking? And then after how I'm thinking, what is my mental state and going into things? And then how am I feeling, both emotionally and spiritually? Do I assume that I deserve these things? Or that perhaps my New Year's resolution is going to achieve itself simply because I made the resolution? What steps are we going to take to actually fulfill those resolutions? If I want to lose weight, am I going to change my diet, or am I going to add workout into the process? Or am I going to do both and then have the forbearance to keep it up? Because we will all come to our own demise one day or another. We are all going to meet our Lord Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether it's now or it's later. So are we going to have the forbearance to be patient through the difficulties that we're in now? Be patient with our own deficiencies so that we can work harder to become better people, so that we can work harder to yield the reward and the profit that we truly want to get in the next life. Getting the reward in this life is very, very easy. The pats on the back, the monetary reward, the happiness in our this is easy in comparison. But this life is a test. And the only way that we're going to be successful in our test, the only way that we will pass this test, is if we humble ourselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then make a sincere intention with it. And then after doing these things, we force ourselves against our own inclinations, against the shaitan and all the naysayers, to achieve the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not going to be easy, like any business is. But like any greatness, it requires forbearance. It requires work on our part, brothers and sisters. And this also is applicable not just to our individual selves. As I mentioned every week, is applicable to our communities. You, all of the shareholders of ISPCC, what do you expect out of me? And how are you going to assist me into achieving greatness? We can't take anything for granted, brothers and sisters. We are blessed. We're warm when it's 12 degrees, perhaps less outside. Are we thanking Allah truly for it? So this is something very, very small that we can start with: gratitude. Thanking Allah for the small things that we have. The fact that we have an administration, the fact that I have a microphone to speak to you on, and the brothers in the back can hear what I'm saying. Each and every one of these things deserves an individual shukr, an individual gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Are we doing it, and what are we going to do more? So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enable us to think on a positive level, to enable us to think righteously and piously for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Allah alone. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make our souls inclined to Him and Him alone, and deter us from anything that may distract us from achieving His pleasure, Ya Allah. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enable us to be humble to Him, both spiritually, emotionally, and intellectually. Allow us to understand that there are always going to be people greater than us, and there will always be people who are suffering and not going through the goodness that we do have. Humble us to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allow us to be humble with our own capabilities and humble with our own position and standing in this world. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enable us to work with forbearance and sincerity for His sake and His alone, to make our limbs follow our souls. And if our souls aren't upright, Ya Allah, make us act in a righteous way, so that perhaps our hearts and our souls will follow in that way. وأقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين واستغفروه وأتوب إليه.